So welcome everybody to the second hour of Mind Shifters Radio. And today is Tuesday, January the 18th, 2022. And our calling number is 563-999-3581. And press 1, and that puts you into queue to talk to us. And we'd love to hear your comments and questions because that makes this your show. We'll give Michael just a minute to get dialed in, and we will be continuing. We started Friday doing one of the forgiveness wake-up sheets from the app on Friday. We completed it yesterday and began the next wake-up sheet that's on the app, which is the more detailed version. And we got down to 2A, and that's honoring truth and expressing ourselves as love. We're going to change the wording on that. And so we will continue, unless somebody has a question and puts a hand up, we'll continue with that wake-up sheet. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, dear heart, and welcome, everybody. Delighted that you're here and that we get to engage with these tools once again. Clarifying, building brain cells, simplifying, complicating, all sorts of neat things happen as we go through this process of understanding how this amazing teaching from 2,000 years ago becomes practical, real in today's world, where we live, where we work, where we have our families, our relationships, our finances, all those things tie together. And so we've covered Step 1 from the 7-step second worksheet that we're doing from the app. And the app you can find at your app store. Just type in the words Heartland, Heartland, all one word, Aramaic, forgiveness. And you'll find that app. And one of the things we did when designing the app, Jean was very careful to make sure that we made the app as private as possible. You'll notice if you download it and put it on your phone, it doesn't say it wants to be able to make phone calls. It doesn't want to change your contacts. It doesn't want to read your contacts. It doesn't want to send text. It doesn't want to be able to take pictures. It doesn't want to be able to record, all those silly things that come with apps that have no business being there. It actually only asks for one permission, and that simple permission is, I need to be able to use the internet. Once you finish doing a worksheet in it, you can print the worksheet and save it as a PDF to your phone. And, of course, it will have to ask for permission to save to your phone. But other than that, no permission is required. So you know that this is your private diary. This is your private place to engage in the forgiveness process. So whatever, your deepest, most private issues, you can put there and be assured that you're the only one that's ever going to be able to access them or see them. And or if you choose not to save it as a PDF, you simply exit the app and, it's now back into the realm of electrons. So we're on to Step 2. And in Step 2, we're looking at moving into this place where I'm going to honor truth. We spoke about that a little yesterday. And I'm willing to face and process out all disease-producing energies for or from all my relations. So we borrowed that phrase from the Native Americans. They have a phrase where they will use the term matakwiasin. And matakwiasin means for all of my relations. If you were a Native American, you went into a sweat lodge or healing ceremony, you knew you weren't just doing it for yourself, literally, that you were tied energetically to the whole creation and especially to your ancestors, forward and backward. And so you were doing that work for everyone involved in the family. You go back into the ancient Aramaic and they talk about the generations. And, that we have generations of energy patterns within us. And when we open the space for healing, then we can literally open what was called the veil of the temple, the barrier between the subconscious and the unconscious. The veil of the temple wasn't a purple curtain in a church. It's that barrier. That we can open that and access those generational patterns. And then the second part of Step 2 is to move into what in this work we like to call cosmic grease, and that is willingness. I have a willingness to soften, to open, and to move through the physical, mental, and emotional symptoms of healing. You know, you remember that healing is not a Dr. Feelgood process. It means that whatever energy patterns are stored in your structure, they're going to be faced and they're going to have to be dealt with. So on a physical level, looks like any kind of physical symptom you've ever had in low energy. On a mental level, looks like any kind of negative thought you've ever had in confusion. And on an emotional level, looks like any kind of negative feeling you've ever had in depression. That's what healing looks like. You know, the only way out is through. You can't pretend it's not there. You can't avoid it. You're going to have to look at it. You're going to have to feel it. You're going to have to deal with it. But with willingness, you can move through something in 2 seconds that maybe took 10 years to develop. On the other hand, if you're unwilling, if you're in resistance, if you're trapped in that resistor, you can take something that took 2 minutes to develop and 10 years later you're still playing around there. So willingness becomes the cosmic grease that opens these energetic patterns within us and empowers us to move through them. Number 3, I'm now going to look at what's the goal. You remember we talked about the goal is like the recruiter of the players for a football team. The recruiter calls in certain players and forms a team out of those players. Well, there's something in your mind, and if you know what it is, you've got a leg up on everybody else who wants to heal. And that is, there's a recruiter that causes your mind, when you're in pain, when pain content is moving in you, there's something that has recruited that pain content into activity. To me, this is just one of the most genius pieces of the puzzle, one of the most profound pieces of understanding that is required to move through the healing process. And that is that when your mind generates a construct that we call perception, that construct is made up of, you know, whatever's resonated in you by that recruiter. We're going to talk about what the recruiter is in just a moment. So that recruiter might resonate something from, 3 generations back on your mom's side. It might resonate something from 10 generations back on dad's side. It might resonate something from when you were 3 years or circling around the sun, or maybe something as well that happened to you when you were 10. And all of those energetic patterns come into play and create this thing that we call perception. Now, when you realize that when you're looking at a construct in your mind, you're looking at your own perception, you're looking at a reflection. Now, they tell us, no, we're looking out onto the world. Well, that's just simple fraud. That's just not the truth. Our mind formulates it so it looks like what we think is out there, but the truth is perception is a construct of the mind. And whatever the recruiter pulls into activity is what's reflected in the construct. If the recruiter pulls in pain, trauma, hate, fear, rage, guilt, grief, then those things show up as part of your perception. And what the world will teach you to do is say, there, you person who are the object of my attention, you made me feel rage and sadness here. Why does one feel rage and sadness in any given situation? Because there's rage and sadness in them. And again, this piece of understanding what the recruiter is, what is it? It's your goals. You'll notice that unless you're just, a generally miserable person, you're pretty happy with most everybody when they're doing everything you want them to do. You set a goal for them, you ask for something, and they give it to you, or they do it. You notice that you're pretty cool with that. The only time you go into upset is when you have a goal for yourself or someone else that isn't being fulfilled. Notice you're working on a project and you get this done and this done and this done, and you're delighted and happy and jumping along, and all of a sudden there's a difficult piece that, oh man, I can't get that part, oh man, and all of a sudden you maybe turn and kick the cat or kick the project, So often we see, films where people go into a rage and they're working on something, and they just smash it and destroy it because they had a goal for themselves. Not because they're mad at the object of attention, whether it's a person or a thing. They're mad because there's mad in them, and the goal they loaded into their mind recruits or resonates, activates that mad part of their mind into activity, and that's when they want to take it out on whatever the object of attention is. Maybe it's their own bodies, kick the door and break a toe. It's like, in what sense does that make, where does that make any sense at all? But recognizing that when you load a goal, if that goal pulls hostility or fear into activity, your perception is going to be degraded by that activity that's happening in your mind. Few people recognize that perception has a quality. The person who functions, on a scale of 1 to 10 at a level 1 or 2 quality perception, we say those people have a lower IQ, a lower intelligence. People are working at a 10. We say, oh, that person's brilliant. Their mind just puts it all together, click, 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 click. But that's high-quality perception. And you'll notice that the only time that things go smoothly and well and really rock is when you have high-quality perception, which means your perception isn't interfered with by hostility or fear recruited into activity by your goals. But what happens when we load a goal in the mind is the mind only shows us a surface picture of what's going on at deeper levels. That Harvard research we quoted, it says that in a time frame where 10,000 brain cells are firing, the maximum amount of data that goes into conscious awareness is 9 bits of data. Tiny framework. So we only get to see the surface, and the surface doesn't show us what's contributing to, if we're in a space of hostility or fear, that hostility or fear, that's hidden. It's out of sight. So we say we're mad at Bill because we have a goal for Bill to do something. The truth is we're not mad at Bill. We've just got mad in our minds, and the goal we loaded has recruited that mad part of our mind into activity, or sad, or hateful, or whatever it happens to be. So in step 3, you want to identify the exact goal that drives your pain perception. So my desire, the constructive result, the exact goal that drives my pain perception is that 1C, my trigger, I want them to, and what is it you want from them? Sometimes people go, oh, well, I don't know. Well, you're in a situation, you want the situation to be different. It's not the way you want it to be. If you gave me a description of exactly, let's say, oh man, you have all the power in the universe and you can bring about the exact result that you want. What would that result be? There's your goal. The importance of identifying the correct goal is that the goal, when loaded into a mind, works via the law of resonance. And so and sometimes people will shift worksheets. They're doing a worksheet on bill, not, the one we used yesterday, not paying money that was owed. And then they get to step 3 and they go, well, gee, if I had that money, life would be good. I'd just like to have a better life. Well, that's not a goal about Bill and the circumstances, situation that you're working with. You want to be exact and specific with the situation that your mind reflects its upset through. And so identifying precisely the outcome that you want, the way you want it to be. And then, having done that, I want to choose to key into love. So I choose love, my essence, which stirs the love in everyone involved. Again, when you realize that we live by the law of resonance, if love is conscious, active, and present in me, the fact that it exists, we know it must be an energy. And by definition, energy is motion. Everything that's in motion creates an energy wave. Imagine you throw a rock into a pond, and you look and you see the ripples of water that come out from that rock. The thing that causes that result is the rock is in motion, hits the water, And the interference pattern is reflected as the waves that move out from the rock. Every thought you think, everything that exists is energy. Let's go back and review Albert Einstein. He says this: on such things as matter, we have been all wrong. What we have heretofore called matter is energy, energy whose vibrations have been so low as to be perceptible to the senses. There is no matter. The material world does not exist as material substance. It exists as energy, and energy is motion, and motion creates waves. So everything you hold sets up an energy wave that communicates what you're holding to all the world. And please be quite aware and be prepared, because somebody's going to show up that's in resonance with that which you hold within you. If what you hold within you is what you hate, somebody's going to show up and show you your hatred. What happens with forgiveness is that when the mind just gives you that little 9-bit piece of information that makes it look like it's all Bill's fault, we know that underlying that there's a whole lot more energy moving. And that's what we need to touch into. That's the reason you do forgiveness, to touch into the underlying hidden parts of the mind that create the results that you say, oh, I don't ever want to experience that again. So I choose love, my essence, and because of the law of resonance, that's going to set up a field that communicates that energetic pattern to everyone involved. And so when I choose to stay connected to love, I've got this person in front of me, maybe it's doing rage or hate or fear or just disturbance and upset. If I will consistently, persistently, and that might mean it might take 10 years. If I will consistently and persistently keep love present, literally keep the energy of love moving in me, sooner or later, that's going to resonate deeply enough in that other person. Going to strengthen that presence of love in them, because nobody's any different. And when that energy moves, then it's going to tend to move that other person in the direction of love. And so our suggestion here with step 3 is that you recognize that if you give up your connection to love, you're in trouble. And here's where I like to tell the rose and the butterfly story. And let's imagine we've got a rose and a butterfly. They meet, they fall in love, they have a wonderful time together, and one day the butterfly up and flies away. The rose, knowing that the love of the butterfly is the most important thing in its life, uproots itself to give chase. What's going to happen to the rose? It's going to die. Why does it die? It dies because it made something more important than being connected to its source. There's another really good demonstration or example of that. If you jump on YouTube, do a search for Christian. It's actually a proper name. It's the name of the lion. Do a search for Christian the lion and watch that video. True story. There are 2 young men in England. They go to Harrods department store, and Harrods has a lion cub for sale, and they buy it. They take it home, and they raise this lion cub until it gets to the size where they can't handle it. They actually have live near a churchyard where, the vicar of the church allowed them to keep this lion and play with it until it just got so big they couldn't handle it anymore. They start communicating, and they want to find a home for it, and they find a reserve in Africa that will accept the lion. By now, it's a pretty huge male. And they ship this lion off, and if I remember correctly, it was about a year later they wanted to go and see the lion, and they communicate with the people who own the reserve, and the people who own or run the reserve are like, no, you can't come and see your lion. It's not your lion anymore. This thing is a wild animal now. It's been released into the wild. It's got its own pride. You just can't go out and visit a lion in the wild in Africa. And these 2 guys are like, we want to come visit our lion. So they do. The people who run the reserve send a ranger out with them that has a high-power rifle because they know they're going to have to shoot and kill this lion if these 2 guys find it. But they go out, You know, the lion has been marked with a GPS locator. They know where it is. They find it, and they go out calling for it. I mean, the video, it's really kind of interesting. You watch them, and they're calling Christian, looking for this lion, and all of a sudden the camera pans over. And here's this huge lion walking down the hill toward them. And I can remember the first time I saw this video, and it's like, God, I hope this is the right lion. And this huge male just all of a sudden starts charging toward them into a gallop and just right at them. And when it gets to them, it jumps up and mauls them lovingly, you know, like it puts its paws around it and legs around them, like it's hugging these two guys, like long lost friend. And, you know, I mean, you can kind of understand how that could work. They raise the lion. But the reason for telling this story is there's another really powerful piece in it. And that is this lion is, you know, a full-grown adult male out in the wild. And it has a female companion that, and, you know, the females in the lion world are usually the huntrix. And the female comes down the hill with them. She's totally wild. She's never been exposed to humans. And to me, this is a demonstration of this law of resonance. When I choose love, it wakes up the love in everyone. Because this female goes over to these two guys that normally she'd probably just tear to shreds meeting them in the wild, rubs up against them and lets her pet them. Pardon me, let them pet her. Pretty amazing video. What happens if you choose to maintain the condition of your human life, love, present in your mind and body, no matter what happens in your world? And I'm not saying that's always easy. You know, when you know the going gets tough, the tough go shopping or get mad. But if there's mad in you, notice through resonance, you will draw the mad in everyone around you, and you'll get to live in that world. But if you've got a commitment to doing something else, and if you ever want to know who you are, just remember the first time you held a newborn child and tap into the essence of that newborn, and you know exactly who and what you are. And each of us is exactly the same. Well, yeah, but what about those bad people? I don't care, those bad people. Hey, I've done a huge amount of work in the prisons over the years. And I've seen some pretty raunchy guys break down into tears. I mean, tough guys. I mean, guys that would, you know, rip me up in a New York minute. In fact, the toughest prison I've ever been in was Ryce in New York, and that was just talk about a horrible vibe to walk in that place. But I've watched some of these guys. I remember, you know, we had a thing called the Judicial Service Agency in Albany, Georgia, and I can remember doing class and being there one day, and this guy comes in. He's about, I don't remember exactly, probably 6'6", big, mean. You know, if you wanted to use the word ugly, you know, tough, brutal-looking guy. My partner, his name is Dan McDougal. I used to call him Mr. Mac. This guy came into the program through the Judicial Service Agency. Judge Asady Kelly had sentenced him to prison and to the Laws of Living course. And I remember we're in maybe the 6th or 8th, 9th week. And this guy comes in, and I mean, he looks brutal. And he's just got this grin on his face, and he looks at Dan McDougal, and he says, Mr. Mac. Everybody called him Mr. Mac. Mr. Mac? Mr. Mac? I kept Rockma present all week this week. Rockma, if you remember, is a filter in the frontal lobes of the brain that allows you to connect to your human life. People who are vicious and brutal and what the world calls nasty have been brutalized by the world. Nasty has been what they've been taught, but it's not who they are. So when I choose to tap into that presence of love, I will tend to draw more of that out of people than anything else. So again, step 3. I choose love, my essence, which stirs the love in everyone. 4. Now, this is kind of, at this point, usually when I present the why is this happening to me again workshop, I'm about 2/3 of the way through the workshop. And so this step number 4A is a synopsis of what we've done in the previous 2.5 to 3.5 hours. When upset, my perception is built out of corrupt data, driven by my goal, number 3. Now, this was the goal for Bill to pay me what he owed me. It is a limiting picture constructed from a max of 9 bits of data out of 10,000 brain cells firing. By canceling my goal, my replicate mind's reality collapses and gives me direct contact with the denied and dissociated parts of my carbon-based memory, which projects and blames others for its content. So in essence, what we're saying here is, so the replicate mind, carbon-based memory, the body's mind, all it can do is play out whatever's in it. So it's going to replicate from the past. It's going to play out whatever's there. If somebody's been raised in a world of hostility and fear, then it's going to replicate hostility and fear. Doesn't mean that's what the being is that has that mind, but that's what the mind does. It's kind of like automatic pilot. But what I'm acknowledging here is that that construct in my mind can be collapsed. And it's collapsed by removing the recruiter of the data my mind habitually uses to generate my construct, my perception. What's the recruiter? The recruiter is that goal we identified earlier. Notice, you don't recruit up, your mind does not bring upset forward, generally speaking, unless somebody's violating a goal you have for them. Otherwise, you got a smile on your face. But when they stop doing what you want them to do, what does your mind show you? Whatever's in there. Carbon-based memory, replicate. So when my reality collapses, it gives me direct contact with the underlying, the denied and dissociated parts of my carbon-based memory, which projects and blames others for its content. So now with this step 4, we come to the action step. While holding love, conscious, active, and present, I now choose to collapse my mind's lies by willingly canceling my goal, the driver, for number 1C, the object of my attention, the person I named in number 3, or the goal I named, I identified in number 3. I'm now going to cancel it. So I'm going to take my answer, and again, the app automatically populates this for you. If you're doing a paper copy of the worksheet, then you're going to write it in. So I'm taking the goal, exactly what I asked for in number 3, I'm transferring it down here to number 4. Pardon me, it actually is number 5. I was off on that. The print that I've got, the printed copy I have is blown up a little bit, so the numbers are actually cut off of the page. I should have written them in, so I stayed on track with that. My mistake. And then you'll notice at the end of that sentence, in number 5, where you cancel the goal, 5A, there's a little hand that points over to the right-hand column that says breathe. So remember that holding the breath is a way to inhibit the movement of mind energy, to inhibit the awareness of what's going on inside of you. By breathing, you have contact with the deeper parts of your own carbon-based memory system. So that's the first step in the actual forgiveness process, where you cancel the goal. Then in 5B, you create an invitation. You're recognizing, here I am with this 9-bit mind, 10,000 brain cells firing. Who knows how much data is in there if I start looking at 1, 2, 10, 50, 100 generations. If you go back just 30 generations in your bloodline, there's 16.9 billion people in your bloodline. It's a lot of data held in there. And so recognizing here, I don't know how to figure that out. I don't even know how to do that. I'm setting the stage. This is my part in the forgiveness process. I'm setting the stage for forgiveness to happen. So now I'm asking for support. I'm inviting, and you'll see that we've got the Aramaic term, rukadikudsha. Rukadikuja in Aramaic speaks of a feminine elemental force in us that undoes the effects of our errors and teaches us the truth. So you're asking that power, and you're expressing your willingness to listen to that power and be inclined toward living in a different state than perhaps your normal. So I invite Rukadikuja, 1, to incline me toward healing. 2, to restore me to my newborn essence love. And again, you'll see a little hand at the end of that sentence that points over to the right-hand column where the word Rachma is. And it defines Rachma as a filter, a gateway, or the frontal lobes of the brain that maintain love. So when that's active in me, is active, I get to live in contact with my human beingness, even if my mind's screaming, raging, traumatized to the max, I get to maintain contact with that. And what happens when Rachma is set in your mind, that's why Yeshua said, when they asked him what's most important in life, he says, if you want to be human, here it is. You got to keep this gateway open. You got to keep this filter active. And what happens is your intentions, which are the raw material of your goals, are kept on track with love. Brilliant. I mean, it's just a genius understanding of how the human mind works. And what you'll find, it may all sound like theory to you at first, but if you just work with it and practice it, you'll see it simply works. It's just how it goes. You don't have, and you don't have to believe it. All you have to do is put it into practice and watch what happens. So I'm asking to be inclined toward healing, checkbox. To restore me to my newborn essence love, checkbox. To heal my denial, check, and to heal my capacity to generate my emotional upset, going back to whatever I have identified in number 1B, checkbox. And then to help me to open a direct, conscious relationship with and gently remove the denied, dissociated, projected parts of my carbon-based memory. So there's several things in 5B that you ask assistance with. Now, what is your term for that? The words Rukadikuja were the words that in the ancient scriptures were translated as the Holy Spirit, but there's nothing about a disembodied spirit being there. It's this feminine elemental force in you that if you ask it and then you're willing to actually listen, it will communicate with you. And then in number 6, you want to just document what's true for you. Now, somebody would say, well, what am I supposed to feel? You're not supposed to feel anything. You're supposed to feel whatever you're feeling. So there's no right answer. It doesn't mean you're going to feel better. Sometimes when you do a worksheet, you'll drop right into the next level of what you've been hiding from yourself, and it'll be more traumatic than it was before you started. But by holding love present, when you touch into those kinds of energetic patterns, those energetic patterns begin to dissolve. You may have to go in once, 2, 10. You might have to do it 30 times a second when you first start. But there'll come a point where that energy will drain from you and you'll be finished with it. So number 6A, I now feel whatever's true for you. And then looking back at the whole situation, you want to look at 1A, B, C, D, E. Looking at that whole situation, how does it look to you now? Maybe you see yourself differently. Geez, I got it. I really am that presence of love. Maybe it's that other person. Maybe you start to see that other person with compassion. Maybe you can see that your story's one that you played out with your power person 1,000 times in childhood, and it's got nothing to do with what happened today, but your replicate mind's still playing it out just because it's there, and you haven't bothered to remove it. You might touch into a deeper hidden part of your mind where those thought disorders resonate, pain and trauma, and you might just go, oh my God, I got it. This is for me. This is about me. This isn't about them. And then you might, have the insight of seeing that The way you want to lash out at somebody else is the way you were lashed out at by your power person. So anything in that arena might be what comes up. I've watched that happen. The most common comment I get from people is they look at it and they go, I can't understand why I was so upset about this. Well, why were you upset? No, because they did this. No, you weren't upset because they did that. You were upset because you had upset in your mind. And now you're forgiving it. Now you're removing the upset. Remember, it's not about forgiving them. It's applying forgiveness to the conditions inside of you to remove those conditions. And once you've removed it, once somebody creates that opening in a particular situation, later they go, why was I so upset? It's because that's the upset level that was stored in you, and you've just forgiven it. You've just removed that upset. And then, now that you've got that opening happening, and the earlier part of the worksheet, you notice we asked you to connect with love and to bring that into the space. There's another aspect of being that's called compassion. It's just another expression of your true created essence, your true being. And this next step is about tapping into and bringing that component of being into the situation. And you do that by asking yourself the question, I asked to be shown a time when I've not fulfilled my goal in number 3. So literally you look at, when did I not fulfill that goal? So just allow yourself to be with, I wanted Bill to do this and this and this. I never stopped to look at, has anybody ever wanted me to do that? But God, that was like the story of my life with my power person. How come I've never seen that before? You know why? Because you got a perceptual construct that's got a grip on you, and you haven't known how to collapse that grip. Forgiveness collapses the grip that the past has on you and gives you a chance to do something different. So you remember that up in number 1, when we touched into feelings, we had a place to draw, or when we touched into emotions, we had a place to draw the state of emotion that you were in. And this is another place to do that. What are your emotions here? And actually, Jeannie, if you make a note, I'm seeing that, in the box up above, we've got the word emotion, but we've got feelings here. We probably, the next edition, we want to change the word feelings in number 6 to emotions. You're going to draw that, and then there's another step here. And that is a commitment, having opened, through forgiveness, a deeper contact with yourself as love. I commit to love, to living a human life. Checkbox. I'm going to check that. Yeah, I'm going to ground that idea. To help achieve this, I do a mass canceling of all the times I wanted number 3 from someone. And then there's a line that says initials. So the idea of this step is that, so I'm looking at, Bill cheated me. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at all the times where I wanted somebody to treat me honestly. So it might be, I remember when I was 5 and my father said he was going to take me for ice cream and he never did. He lied to me. So that would be 1. So I'd put Dad's initials in there. I'd put Dad. The line for the initials are just initials for all the times you held that goal for somebody, maybe even yourself, to fulfill that goal. And you just do a mass canceling of all the times in your life when you wanted that. You've opened a space in your practicing. Of course, refers to open a curtain in your practicing. Well, you've done that. And this can be a place where you can accelerate through deeper levels and deeper layers by bringing to mind all the times where that goal was active in your mind and was frustrated, was not fulfilled. And so I'm going to do a mass canceling in that goal from every situation, every circumstance in my life. And then, number 7, we're going to talk about universal principles here. 7A. A universal principle is that by giving, I first get the original. I'm grateful for this opportunity to heal. So recognizing that whatever energy you put out, in order to get out of you, it's got to go through you. You get the original, they get the carbon copy, and they may not be home for delivery. You want to think twice about what you put out there. So a principle of the universe is that by giving, I first get the original. And so what I want to do here now is I want to tap into gratitude. You know, I mean, when you realize that someone has given you the opportunity to heal a part of your mind, maybe risked your attack of them for doing and saying what they did, deep gratitude is appropriate. So I'm grateful for this opportunity to heal. And then I'm going to choose truth and perfect love. Perfect love, if you remember in Aramaic, there are two filters in the brain. One of them is Rachma. We talked about that earlier, the frontal lobes. In the back of the brain, over perception, there's Kuba. When those two filters are set, they were called perfect love. You'll remember they said perfect love casts out fear. You can't generate a fear-based reality if Rachma and Kuba are set in you. And they're just corresponding filters. Rachma being the filter that is the gateway for love to enter the human form and keeps the mind on track with goals that are keyed to love. And Kuba is a corresponding filter, a cooperating filter. And, you know, it's kind of that old story, you can't have one without the other. If one is active, the other's going to be active. If you have one resonance knocks one of them out, the other's going to be knocked out pretty quickly. So you want to be on guard for that. And when those two filters are set, your mind can't generate a fear-based reality. So I'm asking to have those filters set and active. Truth and perfect love. And then I'm addressing the person I'm doing this worksheet on, number 1C, based on number 3. So looking at the goal that I'm holding, I'm talking to the person. So if I'm doing this worksheet on Bill, I'm talking to Bill. Based on number 3, so what that means is I want it, and I'm looking at structuring a loving goal. I want to structure a goal keyed to love that relates to the issue that I'm working on here. So if I'm working on Bill having been dishonest with me or cheating me or whatever, I'm going to set a goal that relates to something to do with honesty with Bill. So the commitment might be, well, Bill, from now on, you know, whatever happens, I'm committed. I'm going to bring forward the truth in our relationship. You know, if the worksheet that I were doing on Bill saying angry words to me, then my commitment might be, Bill, I'm going to make a commitment to keeping my words with you, loving, gentle, and respectful. And if anything less than that comes up, I'm going to do some forgiveness work in myself. So I structure a truly loving goal toward you and offer you. And what I'm going to offer is always a gentle voice, gentle vocabulary. And then you have to take action on that goal. Remember, once you set a goal is something you're going to achieve within the next waking period. So make sure you set something that you're willing to actually follow through and do something about. And then the final instruction at the bottom of the worksheet is to soften and breathe, to let your whole tissue structure, let your breath move throughout your structure to just soften and let everything in you go. And then you'll see that there's several definitions. Definition of carbon-based memory, the replicate mind, sustained incoherence, fear and hostility, dissociation, what the Aramaic forgiveness process is, and the definition of rukadikucha. So there's the worksheet number 2 from the app that you can find in your app store, whatever phone you've got. If you've got an iPhone or an Android phone, just go to your app store, type in Heartland Aramaic Forgiveness, and you'll see just a really fabulous piece of work that Jeannie has done. It's gone through 4 iterations. It's in its 4th upgrade, and the new upgrade is just a whole new thing. You can ask questions of us there instantly, right on the spot. You're in step 3 and something isn't clear to you. Click a link, just type in your question. Yeah, I'm on step 3, and I don't know what this means, or I need clarity on this. Click send. Then what will happen is Jeannie will get that. Actually doing these 2 worksheets came from somebody who was using the app and had a question about the worksheet. So we said, well, let's go through the whole thing so that we've got that. We can, whenever questions come, then we can just send. And I think Jeannie's going to edit these into one file so that we'll be able to send this whole thing to you if you have a question, or it'll be a feature on the website as one of the special radio shows. And so that's our process of forgiveness, and I'm particularly interested at this point, having gone through both worksheets, in any questions that relate to, something I might not have thought about. You've maybe been doing the work for 10 years, and there's something that was really big for you in doing the worksheet that, didn't enter my mind as I was doing this. But for anybody that might listen, somebody might listen to this 300 years from now, might be an important point that you've learned that you can add to the conversation. I would love to hear from you. And the way we're going to hear from you is by you pushing 1 on your phone, and that'll put a hand up in the phone control panel, or pardon me, the Jeannie's computer, and we'll be able to have a conversation. So if you have a question for us, if you're on one of those stations where we can't see you, our call-in number is 563-999-3581. If you just click that, or call that number, you'll be listening to the show. And if you push 1, we'll be having a conversation. So, Miss Jeannie, do we have anybody out there in the phone queue with a hand up, or anything happening in the chat room? Also, if you happen to have, some experience you've had with a worksheet, something that opened for you that was really profound, that might inspire people, then please push 1. Let's have a conversation. We'd love to hear from you. We've got about 13 or 14 minutes left. So, Miss Jeannie, do you have any thoughts, anything to add that I might not have covered, or any questions?
The only thing I would add is, we do also have a game, and it's a Dragon Klingon game. And someone had mentioned that they were playing the game and that you actually get more points for identifying more emotions and all that. And yet we always say do a different worksheet. So it's a little bit different because it was set up, and we actually had a couple that had been at Heartland that created that as a paper version, and then we turned it into the computerized. But kids often are they're more in touch with what they're feeling, but they've not been taught to express it. And actually, oftentimes they're shut down to keep from expressing it. You can't be angry, from an angry father or whatever. And so the game is set up to encourage them to look at all of their feelings, whether, it's sad, angry, whatever, and listing them all. And so it gives them points for naming more than one, and give them extra points, rather. They get points if they only name one. But
right.
So it encourages them to have different thoughts and different emotions. And so, yes, as an adult and doing the other worksheets, we encourage you to do a separate worksheet for each emotion or feeling or thought. But for the children, it's a little bit different the way that it's set up.
Klingon game. Right.
Right.
Yeah. Cool. Good thought, sweetie. And the Dragon Klingon game is something that adults, we've had more than one adult who's reported that, I just decided to try that, and it opened another piece of the puzzle for them. And, when you talk about those emotions and things, I'm actually working on a brief post that I'm going to do on Facebook. Ran into an article this morning on kids who are forced to grow up too quickly, kids whose parents want them to be geniuses, want to be ahead of the Joneses, want to be the top. They have to go to the best school, and they have to get into the preschool, and they have to all this stuff. And what they're doing is research on the damaging effects of prohibiting a child from being a child, by insisting they grow up too quickly. And oftentimes, in traumatic circumstances, they talk about kids who have street smarts. Well, yeah, they got street smarts, but the development of their minds, their emotions, and their capabilities have been stunted by being forced into street smarts. It's interesting in the indigenous cultures around the world, pretty much universally, there is a celebration that is given to children at approximately the age of 13. And that celebration, it's looked at, you look at the Jewish tradition, there's a bat mitzvah, the bar mitzvah. You look at the traditions of many indigenous cultures, and there's a ceremony, where a woman is taken by the women of the tribe, and she is initiated into womanhood. A young boy, he's at an age, and he's initiated into manhood. He becomes a man. And it's kind of a symbolic time where the family has basically been the source of direction, control, and growth for the child. And there's a place that many, and we don't have this in our culture, which is really a shame, but there's a symbolic time where the family acknowledges who this child has been, the parents, the grandparents and such, and in essence turn them over to the larger community. Unfortunately, the church and government want to get a hold of these kids as soon as they can. So, hey, put them in preschool at 3. We want to start to brainwash them right there. But actually, you look at the wisdom of the indigenous cultures, and it was about the age of 13. And there's an interesting thing that happens around the age of 13. This is something we get into in our Laws of Living course. And that is that the regulatory speech system, there's something we spend a couple of days on in that intensive, talking about regulatory speech, and that it's the speech that governs our physiology, literally our cellular chemistry. It governs the state of health. It governs our creative process. It governs our thinking. It governs our perception. About the age of 13, that speech system kind of becomes set in concrete. They talk about the teenager being in resistance. Well, if the teenager's been taught out of resistance, if they've been forced to grow up early, yeah, you might go through some heavy-duty, terrible teen stuff. But if the child has been allowed to actually grow and mature naturally, rather than being forced through trauma to get street smarts and grow up fast, about the age of 13, the speech system solidifies, but it doesn't solidify out of trauma, and you don't get the resistant, struggling, fighting teen. You get one who functions as a human being, as love. And these indigenous cultures recognize that the family system was designed to have charge of that child until that developed, and then the child was turned over to the larger community. I can remember when my son Michael J. was 13. We just happened to be keynoting at a conference that was organized by a group of teaching centers, retreat centers around the world. So they had people from all over the world. There were people from China, from Korea, from all over Asia, Europe, all over America, South America. And they divided into groups, and myself and Michael J., and there was actually a priest who was part of the group at that conference. And they divided, people into smaller groups. And we had, if I remember correctly, it was probably about 30 people. And these are people who manage retreat centers in different parts of the globe. And Michael J. was turning 13. And we created a ceremony for him. And the ceremony was one where I stood, the people circled around, and Michael J. and I stood at the edge of the circle with them. And this priest acted as the anchor person. He was in the middle of the circle. And I spoke to, and it was Invoking Community, I spoke to the community about who Michael J. was. Interesting, brings some emotion up for me, sweet emotion. But who he is, who he was to our family, and who we could see him becoming as a man. So I got to speak that to that whole group and to him, and then symbolically invite him to walk into the circle to be turned over to the larger community. So now it isn't now mom and dad are the source of accountability, but now, son, you're accountable to the whole community. And so he walked into the circle, and it was really pretty incredible. Because we had people literally from all over the world, and what we asked each of them to do was to share a piece of wisdom from their ancestors, from their family system, from their culture. So each person offered a piece of wisdom to Michael J. that came from their fathers, mothers, grandfathers, grandmothers. And it was just, I wish that I had a video recording of that. That was just such an awesome happening. But anyway, it was honoring, understanding that that was a rite of passage that every child should have. And sadly, many are turned over to that larger community. We send people off to school. We say they need to be socialized. And what that means is, they're going to have one kid in school who had an angry, rageful, fighting older brother, so all of a sudden the bully is going to now come on to this child who's never been exposed to it. Maybe there's another child, a young girl whose father started sexually molesting her when she was 2, and she's now, 4 or 5 or 6, and the child will be exposed to that conversation and 1,000 others that a young child should never have to hear. Yeah, come to the age of majority, and we need to become aware of those things. We need to become cognizant of those things. But when a young child, under the guise of being socialized, is forced to grow into that prematurely, they lose. They lose something very important. One of the things this work is about is regaining that, regaining innocence, regaining awareness of the truth of who we are, and collapsing, forgiving, removing those influences that never belonged within us. So thank you. I wasn't thinking of sharing that, but that's what came to mind. So thank you for allowing me to share that. And we've got a few minutes left. Jean, do we have anybody in the phone queue with a hand up or anything happening in the chat room? Are you muted, Jeannie?
I was. Yes, we do have a hand up. It's
great.
area code 541. 541, you're on the air.
Hi. Good. I'm unmuted and I'm ready to go.
Hey there, Miss Julie.
Hi.
What's on your mind
from
today?
Ashland. Uh-huh.
Yes, Ashland, Oregon.
I wanted to mention that within this last month, sometime in December, during the holidays, I was traveling, and one night I was really feeling time to do a worksheet, and so in the dark I got onto the app for the forgiveness app for doing a worksheet, and I accidentally went into the Dragon Klingon, and I just had the best time with it. It was really freeing in a different way. Because when I recognized, this is for kids, I'm not supposed to do this, but then I said, well, it's working,
Yeah.
It's the same thing, only different, So I went through it, and I found that was really freeing for me to approach it as a child, and I accessed my well-being, the well-being of my child.
Right.
I got to access
That's awesome.
it. And that, that uncovered, I bet there's no time left now, huh?
That's sweet. Yeah, we're just about out of time, but what I'll do, I'm going to make contact. Daniel and J.J. Lyman actually lived at Heartland at the time we were developing some of this, and they took the worksheet and took it in the direction of working with kids, and they actually created the Dragon Klingon game. So I'll pass that feedback on to them. I'm sure they will be delighted to hear that.
Yes, it really helped me let go of things and see where they came from even. It put me right there. Anyway, thanks.
Sweet.
I'm going to do it again.
Awesome.
Okay.
All right, young lady, you have a blessed one.
Blessing.
Thank you for your input and sharing it. And everybody, create the best year yet of your eternal life. It's an awesome gift to give the world. Blessings. Bye-bye.